The ice spreader on the back of my truck was exactly 63 inches wide, and apparently that was enough to destroy the entire moral fabric of the Riverside Estates Homeowners Association in Burlington, Vermont. I had lived in this neighborhood for 8 years without incident, quietly plowing and salting the private roads during winter storms while everyone else stayed warm inside their colonials and split levels. Nobody complained when I cleared 3 feet of snow from their driveways at 5 in the morning, or when I made sure the steep hill on Maple Court was passable for their subs. But that changed the day Karen Chambers got elected HOA president. It was a Tuesday morning in late November when I found the citation tucked under my windshield wiper. The temperature had dropped to 18 degrees overnight, and I had just finished spreading salt and sand on the main thoroughfare through our development. My hands were still numb from working the controls on the spreader, and my breath came out in white clouds as I unfolded the paper. Violation notice. Equipment width exceeds community standards. Fine, $500. Second offense, $1,000. Third offense, legal action and removal of vehicle privileges. I stood there in my driveway, reading the notice 3 times to make sure I was understanding it correctly. Equipment width. I had been using the same salt spreader for 6 years. It was a standard tailgate model, the kind you could buy at any farm supply store in New England. There was nothing unusual or oversized about it. I walked across the street to my neighbor's house and knocked on the door. Dennis opened it, already dressed for work in his insurance adjuster uniform. "Did you get one of these?" I asked, holding up the citation. He shook his head. "One of what?" "A violation notice from the HOA. "I don't do any snow removal, Brian. That's your thing. What did they cite you for?" "My salt spreader is apparently too wide." Dennis squinted at the paper, then looked over my shoulder at my truck. "That's the same spreader you have used every winter since I moved here." "That is exactly what I am thinking." "Karen Chambers," Dennis said, his voice flat. "She has been on a tear since she got elected. Did you hear she fined the Mendelsons for having their garbage cans visible from the street? They were bringing them in from the curb. She caught them in the act of following the rules and still wrote them up because technically, for those 3 minutes, the cans were visible." I folded the citation and shoved it in my pocket. "I need to go to the HOA meeting." "Good luck with that," Dennis said. "Last meeting I attended, she had Robert's Rules of Order memorized and used them to shut down anyone who disagreed with her." The HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at 7, held in the community center that sat at the entrance to Riverside Estates. I arrived 15 minutes early and found 12 other homeowners already there, most of them looking as irritated as I felt. The room smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner, and the fluorescent lights gave everyone a sickly pallor. Karen Chambers sat at the front table, arranging papers into neat stacks. She was 47 years old with a blonde bob that looked like she had styled it with a ruler and protractor. Her sweater was cream-colored and spotless, and she wore a string of pearls that probably cost more than my truck payment. Next to her sat Gerald Morrison, the HOA vice president, who always looked like he would rather be anywhere else. "The meeting will come to order," Karen announced at exactly 7 o'clock, even though people were still filing in. She banged a wooden gavel that seemed far too official for a neighborhood meeting. I raised my hand. "We will have time for comments after the treasurer's report and old business," Karen said without looking at me. "This will just take a second," I said. "I received a citation for my salt spreader being too wide. I would like to know what regulation I am violating." Karen's smile was cold and practiced. "New equipment regulations were passed at last month's meeting. All vehicles and attached equipment must conform to residential street widths with a clearance buffer. Your spreader exceeds the allowable width. What allowable width? Our streets are 18 feet wide. My truck with the spreader is less than 8 feet total. The new regulation specifies that equipment extending beyond the vehicle's factory width cannot exceed 54 inches. She pulled out a binder and flipped to a marked page. Your spreader, as measured by the Compliance Committee, is 63 inches wide. Who is on this Compliance Committee? Myself, Gerald, and Brenda Patterson. Brenda Patterson lived 4 houses down from me and had never forgiven me for refusing to plow her driveway at 3 in the morning during a blizzard 2 years ago. I had been sick with the flu and could barely stand, but she had still called me entitled and selfish. I was not at last month's meeting, I said. I was never notified of any proposed equipment regulations. The meeting minutes were posted on the community website as required by our bylaws. Attendance is not mandatory for regulations to pass. We had quorum and the vote was unanimous among attending board members. How many board members attended? The 3 I mentioned. Again, quorum was met. Now, if you are finished, we have actual business to conduct. Several other homeowners shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I could feel the room's sympathy, but nobody spoke up. That was how Karen operated. She made people feel like any resistance was futile, like she had already won before the fight started. I am not paying the fine, I said, and I am not stopping my ice treatment. People need safe roads. Karen's expression did not change, but her eyes went hard. Then you will receive additional fines and we will pursue legal remedies. This meeting is not a debate forum. Please sit down or leave. I left. There was no point staying and watching her railroad through whatever other petty regulations she had dreamed up. The next morning, I went to work as usual. I was a civil engineer for the state of Vermont, which meant I spent a lot of time reviewing road projects and drainage systems. The irony was not lost on me that I designed public infrastructure for safety, while my HOA tried to prevent me from keeping our private roads safe. My phone rang around 10. It was my wife, Rebecca. "There is another citation on the door," she said. "Karen came by personally to deliver it." "What does this one say?" "Operating non-compliant equipment after receiving notice of violation. $1,000 fine." "Brian, this is getting ridiculous." "I know. Let me make some calls." I spent my lunch break researching Vermont HOA law. What I found was not encouraging. Homeowners associations had broad authority to create and enforce rules as long as those rules were not discriminatory and did not violate state or federal law. The regulations had to be applied evenly. But if everyone in the neighborhood received the same equipment width restrictions, it would be considered fair under the law. The problem was that I was the only person who did any winter road maintenance. Everyone else either had standard snow blowers for their driveways or hired plow services that worked all over Burlington and would not be subject to our HOA rules since they were not residents. Karen had essentially created a regulation that only affected me while maintaining the technical appearance of fairness. I called a lawyer that afternoon. His name was Thomas Brighton, and he specialized in HOA disputes. "She is boxing you in," Thomas said after I explained the situation. "The fine schedule is aggressive but probably legal under your HOA bylaws. Do you have a copy of the complete bylaws?" "I have the version from when I bought my house 8 years ago." "Get the current version. Check if there were proper procedures followed for amending the regulations. Look for any grandfather clauses that might protect existing equipment, and document everything. Take photos, keep records of your ice treatment activities, note weather conditions." "What are my realistic options here?" Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, pay the fines and comply, or prepare for a lengthy legal battle that will cost you more than new equipment. You could attend meetings and try to get the regulations changed, but if she has the votes, you are stuck. Some HOA boards are reasonable. Some are not. You need to figure out which you have got. I already knew which I had. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with Rebecca and our 12-year-old daughter, Emma, and explained the situation. "So you are just going to let them bully you?" Emma asked. She had her mother's sense of justice and my stubborn streak. "I am going to choose my battles," I said. "Fighting this in court would cost thousands of dollars and take months. By then, winter would be over anyway." "What happens to the roads?" Rebecca asked. "The HOA is responsible for maintaining them. If I am not allowed to treat the ice, then they will have to find someone else to do it." "You know they will not," Rebecca said. "Karen will just expect everyone to deal with it and blame you when people complain." She was right, of course. But I was tired of being the neighborhood maintenance man while simultaneously being treated like a criminal for helping people. The first real winter storm hit on December 8th. 6 inches of snow fell overnight, followed by freezing rain that created a coating of ice over everything. I woke up at 4:30, my usual time during winter, and lay in bed listening to the sleet hit the windows. My truck keys sat on the nightstand. The salt spreader was still mounted on the back of my truck, still 63 inches wide, still technically illegal according to Karen Chambers. I rolled over and went back to sleep. At 6:30, my phone started ringing. Dennis first, asking if I had checked the roads. Then Patricia Holcomb from 2 streets over, wondering if I needed help. Then 4 more calls in succession from different neighbors, all saying the same thing. The roads were skating rinks, and nobody could get out of the development. I let the calls go to voicemail. Rebecca came into the bedroom at 7, already dressed for her job at the elementary school in town. "The news says every school in Burlington is on a 2-hour delay because of the ice." "Makes sense," I said. "Are you going to treat the roads?" "No." She studied my face for a long moment. "This is going to get ugly." It already was ugly. I am just done pretending otherwise. By 8 o'clock, the neighborhood group chat was exploding. I had muted it weeks ago, but Rebecca showed me the messages scrolling past on her phone. People were stuck in their driveways. Someone's car had slid into a mailbox on Maple Court. 3 different homeowners were demanding to know why the roads had not been treated. At 8:15, Karen Chambers posted in the group chat, "Brian Wellington has been cited for non-compliant equipment. He chose to ignore HOA regulations. This situation is a direct result of his refusal to follow community standards." Dennis replied, "This situation is a direct result of stupid regulations. Brian has kept our roads clear for years without problems." Karen, "The regulations exist for valid safety and aesthetic reasons. Equipment must meet community standards." Patricia Holcomb, "What safety reason? His salt spreader made things safer." Karen, "Oversized equipment poses risks to parked vehicles and landscaping. The regulations were properly passed and are enforceable." I finally typed a response. "I am happy to treat the roads, remove the equipment width restriction and rescind the fines." Karen, "Regulations are not negotiable. If you wish to maintain community roads, use compliant equipment." Me, "There is no compliant equipment that works. That is the point." Karen, "Then the HOA will hire a service." The chat went silent after that. Everyone was waiting to see if Karen would actually follow through. She did not. The roads stayed icy all day. I worked from home, watching through my window as neighbors struggled to navigate the development. I saw at least 2 near collisions and 1 car that got stuck trying to climb the hill on Maple Court. The fire department had to come help push it back down. My phone rang constantly. I ignored most calls, but answered when my mother called from her assisted living facility in South Burlington. "I heard you are having HOA trouble," she said. "News travels fast. Rebecca called me. She is worried about you." "I am fine, Mom, just tired of being taken advantage of. Your father always said that sometimes the only way to make people see sense is to let them fall on their face. Dad also said to help your neighbors." He did. But neighbors help each other. What you have got is someone who wants to control you. That is different. After we hung up, I thought about what she had said. My father had been a Vermont state trooper for 30 years. He had seen every kind of person, from genuinely good to dangerously manipulative. He had taught me that the worst people were not the obviously bad ones, but the ones who used rules and authority to hurt others while maintaining plausibility. The second storm hit 3 days later. This time it was pure snow, 8 inches of heavy, wet snow that started after midnight and continued through the morning. I listened to the plows rumble past on the main road outside our development, clearing Route 127 while Riverside Estates remained untouched. The group chat was quieter this time. A few people asked about road treatment, but nobody demanded it. Karen posted a message saying she was researching professional snow removal services, but that finding compliant vendors takes time. I cleared my own driveway and called it done. On day 3 of the development being essentially impassable, an ambulance had to come for Mrs. Henderson on Oak Lane. She was 83 and had fallen in her house, possibly breaking her hip. The ambulance got stuck trying to navigate the unplowed, ice-covered roads. They eventually made it, but the delay added 15 minutes to their response time. That evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Gerald Morrison standing there, looking uncomfortable and cold. "Can I come in?" he asked. I let him inside. He stamped snow off his boots and removed his gloves, taking his time like he was gathering his thoughts. "Karen is not going to back down," he said finally. "I need you to know that. She sees this as a battle of wills and she does not lose those." "I am not trying to battle her," I said. "I just want to keep people safe without getting fined into bankruptcy." "I know. I voted against the equipment regulation for what it is worth." She pushed it through anyway using a procedural trick. Called a special session that she knew I could not attend, got Brenda to act as vice president temporarily, and they passed it with just the two of them. That does not sound legal. It is barely legal, but technically it follows the bylaws. She has been studying HOA law for months, ever since she decided to run for president. She knows every loophole and technicality. "What does she want?" Gerald sighed. "Control, authority. She retired from her corporate job last year and I think she misses having power over people. The HOA gave her that outlet, and you were the first person to push back against her, so now she has made you the example. So what happens now? That is why I am here. Mrs. Henderson's son is threatening to sue the HOA for negligence. The ambulance delay is documented. We could be looking at serious liability if she decides to pursue it, and if anything worse happens while the roads are untreated, we are all exposed. Every board member, every homeowner. Tell Karen to rescind the regulation. She will not. But I am going to call an emergency meeting and try to force a vote. I need you there. I need other homeowners there. If we can get enough people to show up and demand action, we might be able to override her." The emergency meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at 2. I spent the days leading up to it talking to neighbors, explaining the situation, asking them to attend. Most were sympathetic, but many were also afraid of getting on Karen's bad side. She had been citation happy since taking office, and nobody wanted to become her next target. Saturday arrived with gray skies and temperatures hovering around 25 degrees. The snow from the last storm was still piled everywhere, dingy and compressed from cars driving over it. The development looked shabby and neglected, a far cry from the neat, maintained appearance Karen always insisted was her priority. 43 homeowners showed up to the meeting. That was the highest attendance anyone could remember for a non-annual gathering. The community center was packed, with people standing along the walls because there were not enough chairs. Karen stood at the front table, flanked by Gerald and Brenda. Her expression was calm, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She had not expected this turnout. This meeting was called to address concerns about winter road maintenance, Gerald began. Due to current equipment regulations, our previous volunteer maintainer can no longer provide service, and the board has been unable to secure alternative arrangements. We need to discuss solutions. The solution is simple, Karen interrupted. Mr. Wellington needs to comply with community standards or cease operations. The HOA will hire professional services as budget allows. An older man named Richard stood up. When will that be? My wife could barely get to her dialysis appointment yesterday. If I had not helped her car down the hill, she would have missed her treatment. We are working on it, Karen said. Working on it is not good enough, Patricia Holcomb said. Brian has been maintaining these roads for free for years. You created a regulation specifically to stop him. Why? The regulation applies to everyone equally, Karen said. Equipment standards ensure safety and preserve our property values. That is garbage, Dennis said, standing up. Brian's salt spreader is not oversized. It is standard. You just wanted to control him, and now we are all suffering because of your ego. The room erupted in agreement. Multiple people started talking at once, voices overlapping in frustration. Karen banged her gavel repeatedly, but nobody paid attention. Order, she shouted. This meeting will be conducted according to proper procedures or it will be adjourned. Then adjourn it, someone yelled. We will hold our own meeting and vote you out. Karen's face flushed red. You cannot vote out a board member except at the annual meeting, which is not until May. And you will follow the community rules or face consequences, just like everyone else. Gerald leaned over and whispered something to her. She shook her head sharply. He whispered again, more urgently this time. The room had gone quiet, watching the exchange. Fine, Karen said finally. I will entertain a motion to temporarily suspend the equipment width regulation until the annual meeting, at which time the full membership can vote on making it permanent. I move to permanently eliminate the regulation, Dennis said. That is not how this works, Karen said. The motion I stated is what is on the table. You can vote yes or no. Gerald raised his hand. I second the motion to temporarily suspend the equipment regulation. Karen's jaw clenched, but she nodded. All in favor. Nearly every hand in the room went up. Opposed, only Karen and Brenda raised their hands. The motion passes, Gerald said quickly, before Karen could find a procedural reason to invalidate the vote. Karen gathered her papers, shoving them into a leather folder with sharp, angry movements. This meeting is adjourned. She walked out without looking at anyone, Brenda scurrying after her. The room felt lighter immediately, people talking and even laughing with relief. Dennis clapped me on the shoulder. You can treat the roads now, he said. The regulation is only suspended until May, I pointed out. She is going to spend the next few months campaigning to make it permanent. Then we spend those months making sure she loses the vote. Or better yet, making sure she loses her position entirely. I wanted to feel victorious, but I mainly felt tired. This should never have been a fight in the first place. That night, I hooked up the salt spreader and treated every road in the development. It took 3 hours, and by the time I finished, my hands were numb and my back ached. But the roads were safe, and that mattered more than anything else. The next few weeks passed quietly. Winter continued its assault on Vermont with regular snowstorms and sub-zero temperatures. I maintained the roads like I always had, getting up early to plow and spread salt before people headed to work. Nobody complained. Karen stayed silent in the group chat, though I saw her curtains move whenever I drove past her house. Then, 2 days after Christmas, everything went wrong. It was a Tuesday morning, and the temperature had dropped to -8 degrees overnight. I had treated the roads at 4 in the morning, my usual early shift. The salt and sand mixture was working well despite the extreme cold. I came home, took a hot shower, and was eating breakfast when my phone rang. It was Gerald Morrison, and he sounded panicked. "Did you treat the roads this morning?" he asked. "Of course, around 4. "Which roads exactly?" "All the main routes. Maple Court, Oak Lane, River Drive, and the entrance from Route 127. "Why?" "Karen is saying you deliberately skipped Birch Street, and that is why Linda Morrison slid into a ditch and totaled her car." "I did not skip Birch Street. I never skip streets. Linda says the road was pure ice. She went off at the curve by the retention pond. That curve was notorious. It was too tight and too steep, a design flaw from when the development was built in the 1980s. I always made sure to treat it thoroughly because I knew it was dangerous." "Is Linda okay?" I asked. "She is fine, shaken up but no injuries. Her car is trashed though, and Karen is saying you are liable because you were negligent in your maintenance." "That is insane. I specifically remember treating that curve. I did it twice because I knew how bad it was." "Can you prove that?" I thought about it. I have the GPS tracker in my truck for when I travel for work. It logs everywhere I drive. That would show I was on Birch Street this morning. Get that data and send it to me. Now, before Karen tries to do something official. I downloaded the GPS data and emailed it to Gerald within 10 minutes. The log clearly showed my truck traveling the full length of Birch Street at 4:17 in the morning, moving slowly in a pattern consistent with plowing and spreading salt. Gerald called back 20 minutes later. "The data is clear. You definitely treated that street, but Karen is still pushing the liability angle. She is saying even if you treated it, you must have done it improperly because Linda crashed. That curve is dangerous in any weather. People go off there even in summer." "I know. I have been saying that for years, but Karen sees an opportunity to blame you for something and she is taking it." That afternoon, I received a formal letter from Karen, sent via certified mail. It informed me that the HOA was holding me liable for damages to Linda Morrison's vehicle and demanding I provide proof of insurance. If I could not prove adequate coverage, the HOA would pursue legal action for the full cost of vehicle replacement and any associated medical expenses. I called Thomas Brighton again. "They cannot do this," Thomas said after reading the letter I had photographed and texted him. "You are a volunteer. You are not acting as an agent of the HOA. You are not liable for accidents that occur on roads you maintained unless you were grossly negligent, and weather conditions causing a slide do not meet that standard." So what do I do? Ignore it. Do not respond. Do not acknowledge their claim. Do not apologize. Anything you say could be used to establish that you accepted responsibility. Just document your maintenance activities and let them try to take action if they want. They will lose. "What about Linda? Her car is wrecked. I feel bad. Linda slid on ice. That is what ice does." Unless you can be shown to have deliberately left that section untreated or used some substance that made it more dangerous, You are not at fault. This is Karen trying to weaponize a bad situation. I followed Thomas's advice and did not respond. Karen sent 2 follow-up letters, each more demanding than the last. I filed them away and continued treating the roads. The situation might have ended there, except Karen made a mistake. She was so focused on punishing me that she did not realize she was creating her own liability. It happened on January 15th. The temperature had been hovering around freezing for 3 days, causing a cycle of melting and refreezing that made the roads treacherous no matter how much salt I put down. I treated the roads every morning and again in the evening, going through bags of salt and sand at an unsustainable rate. At 6:30 in the evening, just after I finished the second treatment of the day, Karen sent a message in the group chat. I am officially notifying all residents that Brian Wellington is performing road maintenance without HOA authorization. The board has not approved his activities this winter. Anyone who experiences property damage or personal injury related to road conditions should contact me immediately for documentation purposes. I stared at the message in disbelief. She was trying to retroactively revoke permission I had already been given by the emergency meeting vote. Gerald responded within seconds. That is false. The equipment regulation was suspended, and maintenance activities were implicitly approved by that action. You cannot unilaterally reverse a membership vote. Karen. The vote suspended one regulation. It did not grant authorization for ongoing maintenance activities. That requires separate board approval, which has not been given. Dennis. You are trying to set Brian up to take the fall for anything that goes wrong. This is ridiculous. The chat exploded again with people arguing. I stopped reading after a few minutes. It was pointless trying to reason with someone who was determined to be unreasonable. The next morning, I did not treat the roads. I had spent $600 of my own money on salt and sand over the past 6 weeks. I had lost sleep, strained my back, and worn out my truck. And in return, I had been fined, threatened with legal action, and publicly accused of negligence. I was done. By noon, the group chat was full of people asking about road treatment. The overnight freeze had left everything icy again. Several people said they were working from home because they could not safely get out of the development. I posted one message. Per Karen's statement last night, I am not authorized to perform road maintenance. Please contact the HOA board for alternative arrangements. Karen did not respond publicly, but my doorbell rang at 2 in the afternoon. I opened it to find her standing there with Brenda beside her, both looking cold and irritated. We need to talk, Karen said. Do we? You are endangering the community by refusing to maintain the roads. I am not refusing. You said I did not have authorization. I am following your directive. Do not play games with me. You know what I meant. I really do not. You sent a message saying I was performing maintenance without approval, so I stopped. If the HOA wants the roads maintained, the board can authorize it and indemnify me against liability claims. Put it in writing, signed by all board members. Karen's eyes narrowed. You are not in a position to make demands. I am not making demands. I am protecting myself. You tried to hold me liable for Linda Morrison's accident. You sent me letters demanding insurance information. You publicly stated I was not authorized to work. So now I am not working. That is you getting exactly what you asked for. The community needs those roads clear. Then the community should have a board that supports its volunteers instead of harassing them. Brenda spoke up for the first time. We could fine you for not maintaining the roads. The bylaws say homeowners must contribute to community welfare. I almost laughed. Fine me for not doing volunteer work that you said I was not authorized to do. Please try that. I would love to see it hold up in any court." Karen's face was rigid with anger. "You are being incredibly selfish." "No, Karen, I am being incredibly done. Now get off my property." They left, Brenda walking carefully on the icy driveway while Karen stomped ahead with her usual conviction that the world would arrange itself to accommodate her. That evening, Gerald called me. "She is talking about hiring a lawyer to force you to maintain the roads." I told her it was insane, but she is not listening. She is fixated on this. Let her hire a lawyer. I will hire Thomas Brighton and we will countersue for harassment. See how the membership feels about their HOA dues going toward legal fees because Karen wants to punish someone for helping. It should not have come to this. No, it should not have. But here we are. The road stayed untreated for 4 days. During that time, we had 2 more minor accidents, several near misses, and a mailbox destroyed when someone could not stop on the ice. The group chat was a war zone of accusations and arguments. Some people blamed me for being stubborn. Others blamed Karen for creating the situation. Most just wanted it resolved. On the 5th day, the Burlington Free Press ran a story about HOA disputes in the area. Somehow, our situation ended up featured prominently. The article interviewed several Riverside Estates residents, including Patricia Holcomb, who explained the entire equipment regulation debacle and subsequent fallout. The article made Karen look petty and vindictive, which was accurate, but also made me look stubborn, which was also fair. By that evening, the story had been shared hundreds of times on social media. People were commenting about their own HOA nightmares, and our little development had become a symbol of everything wrong with neighborhood governance. My phone rang at 8. It was a reporter from Vermont Public Radio wanting to interview me. I declined. The last thing I needed was more publicity. But the publicity had an effect. At 9, Gerald called to tell me an emergency board meeting had been scheduled for the next evening. He would not say what it was about, but I could hear the relief in his voice. I attended the meeting with Rebecca. About 30 other homeowners showed up, a solid turnout for a weeknight in January. Karen sat at the front table alone. Gerald was absent and so was Brenda. Karen cleared her throat. "I am resigning as HOA president, effective immediately. Gerald Morrison will assume the role as vice president until the annual meeting in May. I am also resigning from the board entirely. This community has made clear that my leadership is not valued, and I see no point in continuing." She stood up, gathered her materials, and walked out. There was stunned silence for a moment, then someone started clapping. It spread until most of the room was applauding, not necessarily because they were happy she was gone, but because the tension had finally broken. Gerald arrived 10 minutes later, looking harried. "Sorry I am late. Karen just called me 20 minutes ago to tell me what she was doing. So I guess I am president now. Congratulations," someone called out, and there was scattered laughter. "First order of business," Gerald said. "Brian, the board apologizes for how this situation was handled. You have been providing a valuable service to this community for years and you were treated poorly. If you are willing to continue road maintenance, the board will draft a formal authorization with appropriate liability protections. We will also reimburse you for materials costs. Does that work?" I stood up. "I will maintain the roads for the rest of this winter, but I am done after that. The community needs to hire a professional service going forward. This should not depend on one person's goodwill." Gerald nodded. "That is fair. We will add it to the budget for next year. Now, can we please get the roads salted? My wife almost went into a ditch this morning." The room laughed, and just like that, the crisis was over. I treated the roads that night and every morning after for the rest of the winter. Gerald had a formal agreement drafted that indemnified me against liability, except in cases of gross negligence. The HOA also reimbursed me $840 for salt and sand, which was less than I had spent but more than I had expected to get back. Linda Morrison apologized to me in February. She admitted that Karen had pressured her to consider suing me, but that she had never actually wanted to. Her insurance had covered the car, and she knew the accident was just bad luck on a dangerous curve. Karen moved out of Riverside Estates in March. I heard she bought a condo in South Burlington, somewhere without an HOA. The irony was not lost on anyone. At the annual meeting in May, Gerald was officially elected president and immediately moved to eliminate the equipment width regulation permanently. The vote was unanimous among the 67 homeowners who attended. He also pushed through a budget allocation for professional snow removal starting in the 2026-2027 winter season. My salt spreader sat in my garage all summer, still 63 inches wide, still perfectly functional. I thought about selling it, but decided to keep it. Maybe someday, I would use it to help a neighbor outside the development, someone who would appreciate it without demanding I change everything to suit their arbitrary rules. The whole experience taught me something important about communities and power. Most people are reasonable. Most people want to help each other and get along, but it only takes one person with authority and bad intentions to poison everything. Karen had not broken any laws, had not committed any obvious crimes. She had just used the rules to hurt someone who refused to submit to her control, and in doing so, she had hurt the entire community. The sad part was that she probably never understood why everyone turned against her. In her mind, she was enforcing standards and maintaining order. She could not see that her standards were arbitrary and her order was tyranny. I thought about that a lot over the summer, working in my garden and watching Emma play basketball in the driveway. Communities are fragile things, built on trust and mutual support. They can be destroyed by selfishness, but also by rigid adherence to rules that serve no purpose beyond control. By the time winter rolled around again, the HOA had hired Morton's snow removal services out of Essex. They did a decent job, though not as thorough as I had been. They treated the main roads but often missed the dead-end courts and the areas near the retention pond. A few times I was tempted to hook up my spreader and touch up the spots they missed, but I resisted. This was not my responsibility anymore. Dennis mentioned one day in late December that he had seen Karen at the grocery store. She had pretended not to recognize him. She looked miserable, he said. Like she did not have any friends with her, just buying frozen dinners for one. I felt a small pang of sympathy, but it passed quickly. Karen had made her choices. She had prioritized control over community, rules over relationships. The loneliness that resulted was not something inflicted on her. It was something she had created herself. In January, the new HOA board sent out a survey asking homeowners what improvements they wanted to see in the development. Road safety was the top response, followed by better lighting and updated playground equipment. Gerald and the board began planning long-term improvements, including redesigning that dangerous curve on Birch Street that had caused so much trouble. I volunteered to consult on the road project, using my civil engineering background to help design something safer. The work was satisfying in a way that snow removal had never been. This was building something permanent, something that would help people for years to come. Emma asked me one evening if I missed doing the snow removal. We were sitting at dinner, and Rebecca had just mentioned how much quieter my winter mornings were now. Sometimes, I admitted, I liked knowing I was helping people, but I do not miss the stress of dealing with Karen. Good, Emma said. You should not have to deal with mean people just to be nice. She was right, of course. Kids often are. They see things more clearly than adults, without all the complicated justifications we layer over bad behavior. That summer, Gerald knocked on my door with news. The board had voted to name the redesigned section of Birch Street Wellington Curve in recognition of my years of winter maintenance work. There would be a small plaque and everything. I told him it was not necessary, but I was touched. It was a strange kind of vindication, having my name permanently attached to a road in a development where I had once been treated like a problem to be solved. The dedication ceremony was in September, a small affair with maybe 20 neighbors attending. Gerald made a short speech about community service and how important it was to recognize people who gave their time to help others. Emma was there, looking proud, and Rebecca squeezed my hand as they unveiled the plaque. It was a nice moment. Not dramatic, not life-changing, just nice. And maybe that was the real lesson from the whole mess with Karen and the salt spreader and the months of conflict. The dramatic moments are what we remember, but the nice moments are what actually matter. The quiet morning when you clear someone's road so they can get to work safely. The thank you wave from a neighbor. The knowledge that you made someone's day a little bit easier. Karen had been obsessed with control and authority, with being important and in charge. She had missed the entire point of community, which was not about power but about connection. I thought about her sometimes, alone in her condo in South Burlington, surrounded by her perfectly maintained spaces and her rigid rules that only she had to follow. I wondered if she ever realized what she had lost in her pursuit of control, if she ever understood that the thing she wanted most was the thing her behavior made impossible. Maybe she did. Maybe she did not. It was not really my concern anymore. The snow came early that year, a surprise October storm that dumped 4 inches before the leaves had even finished falling. Morton's snow removal was caught off guard and did not make it to our development until noon. By then, Emma's school had been canceled and the roads were a mess. I watched from my window as their truck worked through the streets, struggling with the wet, heavy snow. They did their job adequately, nothing more. The roads were passable, which was all anyone really needed. My salt spreader sat in the garage, unused but maintained, ready if I ever needed it for my own driveway or some future emergency. It was 63 inches wide, exactly the same width it had always been. The difference was that now nobody cared, and that made all the difference in the world. Winter passed into spring and spring into summer. Life continued in Riverside Estates without drama, without conflict. The HOA board functioned quietly and effectively under Gerald's leadership. Regulations were passed that made sense, enforced with reasonable judgment. Nobody got into fights at meetings. It was boring in the best possible way. One evening in late June, I was mowing my lawn when a car pulled up and a woman I did not recognize stepped out. She was maybe 50 with an uncertain smile. "Are you Brian Wellington?" she asked. "I am." "I am Susan Foster. I just bought Karen Chambers' old house." I shut off the mower. "Welcome to the neighborhood." "Thanks. I heard there was some kind of drama with the previous owner, something about snow removal." I gave her the abbreviated version, hitting the highlights without dwelling on the uglier details. Susan listened, shaking her head. "That sounds horrible. I am sorry you went through that. It worked out in the end." "Well, I just wanted to introduce myself and let you know that I am not like that. I think HOAs should be about helping people, not controlling them. I think you will fit in well here then." She smiled and went back to her car. I restarted the mower and finished the lawn, thinking about new beginnings and second chances. Karen's house was no longer Karen's house. It was Susan's house now, and she would create her own story there. That was how communities worked, I realized. They were not static things, frozen in time. They evolved as people came and went, as conflicts arose and were resolved, as personalities clashed and eventually found equilibrium. The story of the salt spreader and the HOA would eventually fade into legend, told to new residents as a cautionary tale or a funny anecdote, depending on who was telling it. But for the people who lived through it, we would always remember. We would remember how close we came to tearing ourselves apart over something so trivial. We would remember the importance of standing up to unreasonable authority, but also the cost of those battles. We would remember that communities are built on the small, daily acts of kindness and cooperation, not on rules and regulations. And I would remember that my salt spreader, 63 inches wide and fully functional, had become a symbol of something larger than itself. It represented the tension between individual freedom and community standards, between helping others and protecting yourself, between doing what was right and doing what was easy in the end. I had chosen what was right, even when it was hard. And the community had eventually chosen correctly too, though it took them longer to get there. That was okay. People need time to figure things out, to see past their fears and realize what truly matters. Gerald stopped by later that evening with beers and an update on the road redesign project. We sat on my porch watching the sun set, talking about drainage patterns and traffic flow like the engineering nerds we both were. "You know," Gerald said, "I never thanked you properly for standing up to Karen. If you had just backed down and removed the spreader, she would have kept pushing. She would have found new ways to control people. You standing firm forced the issue and ultimately got her out." I was not trying to force her out. I just wanted to spread salt without getting fined. I know, but the effect was the same. Sometimes the right thing happens for unexpected reasons. We clinked bottles and drank our beer, watching fireflies begin their nightly dance across the lawn. Emma came out and joined us, telling Gerald about her plans to try out for the travel basketball team in the fall. Rebecca brought out cookies, warm from the oven, and we all sat together in the comfortable silence of summer evening. This was what mattered. This moment, this connection, this sense of belonging to something larger than myself without being controlled by it. Karen had never understood that and probably never would, but I did. And so did the other people who called Riverside Estates home. We had learned our lesson about the difference between leadership and tyranny, between rules and wisdom. And every time I drove past Wellington Curve with its small brass plaque, I was reminded that standing up for what was right might be difficult, might be costly, might take longer than expected. But in the end, it was always worth it. The salt spreader in my garage was proof of that. 63 inches wide, exactly as it should be, exactly as it had always been. Not too wide, not too narrow. Just right for the job it was meant to do, and that, more than any regulation or rule or citation, was what truly mattered.